because I just like that song, but also I told you about how crazy hard that it was for me to climb a mountain. Thought I was going to die doing it, but how I love now that I'm not climbing that mountain anymore. I love going and telling that story of pushing through with my friends up to the summit. I love telling that story whenever I can. Just like I told you the story of the crazy hard Christmas of 2005. When our families, it was the hardest Christmas ever. Things fell apart, including ourselves, and yet, to this day, somehow, we as a family love going and telling and remembering that story of our family pushing through our toughest Christmas ever. That's just kind of the way things work, and I encouraged you that in the same way, even through the crazy hard year that Legacy has been through, or maybe you and yours have been through, with Him on your side, we are going to get to that place, and you'll get to that place, right, where you're proud to tell our story of God pulling us through, pushing us through, sometimes the toughest stuff ever, right? So we love telling those underdog stories where God has to come into the rescue, right? Where He just comes in and He saves the day. We just love that. It's why I've loved spending this season talking our way through the greatest story ever. The coming of the Christ of Christmas that is found actually in the entire Bible, from the beginning to the very end. And remember, we covered all of Genesis that first week. Genesis chapter 1, God creates everything. Genesis chapter 2, He creates His most special creation, and that is people. Right? To live with Him in a good, peaceful relationship forever. The way it was meant to be. By Genesis chapter 3, we meet that snake, Satan. He tempts people to disobey God. They take the bait, and they experience what we call the fall. The fall of mankind, the fall of humanity, the fall into a sinful state, a trap of their own making with no way out. But from the very beginning, God started planning a way out. See, first he spelled out the curses and the consequences of that sin and what it created for people, including hardship in life, pain, death, separation from God. Not at all what God wanted for people, but it was the new reality for us nonetheless. Genesis 3, though, 14 through 15, God has a curse for Satan too. He's always going to be that low-down, irredeemable snake whose only fulfillment in his existence is our death and our destruction. And God hides a little promise there in verse 15, where He says He is going to send Satan's worst enemy to crush Satan's head, crush the powers of sin and death and separation from God, and set humanity free from their captivity again. Right? And so it was the original promise of the Christ to come. Satan would have just known Him as the crusher. And that's just kind of what's in his head now. And that's all he knows. That's the main clue he's got. And we were challenged and inspired to this kind of perspective of the Scriptures. The entirety of Scriptures. It's not just a compilation of different things that don't relate with one another. Somehow, in all of these different books, the rest of Old Testament history, in fact, the rest of Old Testament and New Testament history, but is just this. It is the rest of His story. The crusher's story. That first week we dove in deep to kind of trace the clues that God gave in Genesis of who this crusher would be. Clue number 1 was right there in verse 15. He would be a real man born of a real woman, a human, right? Then you've got the do-over of the flood there early in Genesis, makes clue number 2 real clear. This crusher man is going to have to come through the line of Noah. From there, then, mankind and countless family lines fill the earth. But out of them all, zillions of them, right? God in the Bible just happens to zero in on one man, and his particular family line, and gives this man promises of worldwide blessing, worldwide impact for all people for all time. I mean, what are the chances that the Bible comes in and just narrows down in on one out of the zillions? And we see there clue number 3, that this crusher would come through the line of this man, Abraham. And then of Abraham's sons, clue number 4 becomes real clear, right? That the crusher is going to come through the line of Isaac. And of Isaac's sons, clue number 5 is clear. The crusher would come through the line of Jacob. And of all 12 of Jacob's sons, clue number 6, by the end of Genesis, God's anointed one would eventually come through the line of Judah. That week, I remember somebody telling me, I have never seen Christ quite so clearly in Genesis as I did that week. And if Genesis in a day was a feat, then last Sunday, I really went to town. I took you through the rest of the Old Testament. All of that history, and we saw it over and over and over again. In between the lines, you could see Satan was scheming to destroy the family line of this coming crusher, because he's like, if I can get rid of them, then there is no crusher coming for me. But God keeps rescuing this family line for the sake and of the promise, his promise that he made way back in the beginning, and of his promised one. And out of that tribe of Judah came a shepherd boy, David, who God anointed king, and God made a very clear clue number 7, that the crusher will come through the line of David. And then as we followed the Old Testament to the end of its history, and a lot of it was about David's line, we came to the jaw-dropping realization that out of Abraham's line and Isaac's line and Jacob's line, all that is left in existence is this one line, Judah, where the term Jews comes from. And within that lone tribe of Judah, there is this line of David. Some of you mentioned last week how much that fact impressed you, that the majority of the Hebrews did not survive the Old Testament history. But the ones who did just happened to be the one tribe, the one line that God promised to send his crusher through. Like, what are the chances of that happening? But God wanted us to be really, really confident. And that's why last week I promised you there were still more clues to cover. And so we're going to look at those clues today. I call them clues number 8 through 327. That's right. Because all along throughout the centuries of the United Kingdom of Israel, right? You think of like Saul and then David and Solomon, right? When they're all one. And then the centuries of the divided kingdoms of Israel to the north, those 10 tribes, and Judah, the 2 tribes down to the south. And even later, during the centuries that lone Judah survived in exile, God had been inspiring among his people prophets to seek God. They were just all about God and seek him with everything they had. And in all their seeking, they too started seeing that this God's promise all throughout, that a crusher was coming. They started calling by another name, the Anointed One. In Hebrew, that's the Messiah. In Greek, that's the Christ. And as God inspired those prophets to speak out as well about him and for him, they find themselves saying even finer details about the coming of this crusher. Details that we call prophecies. For they were words and phrases, much of them attributed to the prophets, but words and phrases, think about this, that were uttered hundreds to even thousands of years BC. But referring to things yet to come. And particularly of this Christ figure to come. Jewish religious teachers notice over 300 of these kind of prophecies. Some of the rabbi schools, they had like 570 that they saw as clear prophecies, clues of this crusher to come, this Messiah, this Christ. And they write extensively about this coming one. But today, let's just take a few. Micah, he promises that this ancient promised one to come is going to be born in this small, no-name town of Bethlehem. Isaiah says that this will be a son born of a human woman, but in particular of a virgin woman. Again, what are the chances? In the line of David, he'll be born, they would say, but then he would also be, so he'd be a human and in the line of David and in the line of Judah, but he would also be this son who would be called things like Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. That God's kingdom will be on his shoulders and he will bring a peace that has no end. Like, what are the chances somebody's going to be able to bring that? Jeremiah speaks of a time when the birthplace, his birthplace of Bethlehem, will mourn, for their children will be slaughtered. Hosea speaks of a son who will escape into Egypt. Isaiah speaks of a light that will dawn in the land of Galilee to the north. Three very, very different places, but associated somehow with him. What are the chances one guy can fulfill? Moses speaks of the greatest prophet to come. David speaks of this greatest priest to come, to be that bridge between heaven and earth, God and man. Isaiah says the one coming from the line of David will be known because the Spirit of God himself will rest fully on him and in him, and he will live and act and speak graciously, sinlessly, compassionately, fully trustworthy. The prophecies say that this God-man will come to teach, save, and heal from God. And yet, as great as he is, he will be rejected by his own people. Zechariah speaks of Jerusalem's king coming, riding into Jerusalem on a donkey, bringing peace and salvation, and yet sold for 30 pieces of silver. David speaks of one betrayed by a friend, lied about by false witnesses. Yet Isaiah says this special servant will be silent and suffer great abuse. David and Zechariah both describe his hands and his feet pierced. David speaks of one who would be mocked and insulted. Lots even cast for his clothes. And yet, in the midst of it all, he'll pray for his enemies. And in all the brutality, not one bone will be broken. And yet, Zechariah describes his side pierced in death. Isaiah speaks of his assignment to die with sinners on both sides. And die even as a burden bearer, a sin bearer, a sacrifice. And then be buried in the very identifiable graves of the rich and famous. But like David claims, God will not let this Holy One to come be abandoned in death, or let his body even have enough time to see decay. Somehow he will rise from death's clutches. He will ascend, it says, to the highest places. And in so doing, it says that those who once were fallen and once were captive would now be saved and set free to follow him back into the best places, into the highest places as well once again. And on and on and on. These prophets and these prophecies give finer and finer detail to this coming one, this anointed one, this Christ, this Messiah. And you're like, sounds like somebody you know. One of the wildest prophecies was from Daniel. And we'll actually get into that one next Sunday as we meet those magi from the east, following many of Daniel's very, very specific prophetic clues to find this Christ child. But needless to say, 600 years BC, Daniel gets so specific in his prophecies that he creates a timeline of events to come in which he gives an exact number of centuries and years until the coming of the Anointed One, and the suffering and the sacrifice of the Anointed One, the victory of the Anointed One. That's why, because at the dawn of what we now call, it wasn't called that then, but what we now call the first century, the beginning of the first century, that specific timeline of Daniel's was drawing nigh. That's why there has never been a time in history when people have had more of what they call a messianic anticipation. Right? This anticipation, this expectation that the Anointed One, the Messiah, the promised Christ was coming. And he was coming soon to dwell among us. Than those years surrounding the dawn of that first century. I mean, think about it. Throughout the gospel stories, it is a running commentary, isn't it? A constant. Hey, could this be the Messiah? Could this be the Christ? They went chasing after this and after that, but could this be the one, the Anointed One? I mean, think about it. An exact timeline. Hundreds of clues. It was as if God really, really, really wanted us to hope for the Messiah. To anticipate the Anointed One. To have every possible clue about the coming Christ. But again, what are the chances? What are the chances one person could fulfill these hundreds of clues given over centuries and even millennia BC from different people, different patriarchs, different prophets, different kings, different places? By the science of probabilities, the chances of one person even fulfilling just 48 of those 327 clues about the crusher is one chance in 10 to the 157th power. Which, hold on a second, I just need to see that right now. Right there. I mean, come on. One chance in a 1 followed by that many zeros. That's just 48 come true out of the 327 in one person. So imagine the chances that any one person would fulfill all 327 of the crusher clues. That is, my friends, the very definition of impossible. So it's no wonder that when we fast forward to the dawn of the first century, in the small town of Nazareth, to a young virgin who is in the line of David. She is in the tribe of Judah, but still, that's just a couple things right there. An angel has to come and audibly give her the news. You're the one. Come on. You got this. I got to tell you, you will be with child and you will give birth to a son. He's like, ooh. Who will be the Son of the Most High? The Son of God. Whoa. And he will inherit the throne of David himself. He will be that one who will reign over the people of God forever. And his kingdom will never end. This is so outside the realm of possibilities. That's the angel has to say those words in Luke 1:37. He says, with man, things may be impossible. Right? Probabilities. But with God, nothing is impossible. And this literally impossible promise to fulfill, this undeniably impossible thing to accomplish, this unequivocally impossible thing is in fact possible with our God. And that, my friends, is why we can't help but celebrate during this season the impossible incarnation of God, the impossible fulfillment of every clue, the impossible accomplishment of God's promise since the beginning and his will. The single greatest gift in the history of all heaven and earth. The absolutely impossible made absolutely possible. And know this, my friends, when God does impossible, we go audible, right? And when God does impossible, we go audible. We have got to say something. And that's why when the director of the local kindergarten, where I used to teach during my college years, I know, go ahead, have your laughs. Yeah, My main excuse, I was in a garage band, but my main excuse, it was the 80s. All right, it was the 80s. That's just how we all looked, right? Yeah, if somebody out there says that, I know, right? And but when the director called me into her office and she asked me to write and sing a Christmas song for the grand finale of the annual holiday program, where hundreds of parents and grandparents and family would gather and hear their kids sing. And she said, write and sing a Christmas song. I was like, yeah, count me in, because I'm going to be able to now share the awesome reason for the season, because it is Christmas and his name is Jesus and he is the Christ. But she also knew that I love Jesus. And she knew that I talked a lot about Christ. She even heard that I'd try to tell a whole mall about him, right? You heard that last week. So she said, Steve, my only condition, is just don't write about anything religious. Keep the words God and Jesus out of the song. I'm thinking to myself, keep the Christ out of Christmas. How dare you? And I looked her in the eyes, and like a brave, bold man of conviction, I said, okay, I'll give it a try. And I tried to come up with this cute Christmas ditty without Jesus in it, but it wasn't coming to my mind. So on the day before the program, I told her I couldn't come up with anything, so I'd have to bow out. She said, I have faith in you, Steve. You'll come up with something. And so the night before the program, I'm strumming the 3 chords that I know of the one song that I had written so far, right? And I'm just strumming it, and suddenly somebody somewhere starts giving me words to a Christmas song that didn't have the words God or Jesus in it anywhere. I wrote them down, and I told the director the next day, the day of the program, that I had something, but she might not like it. She said, oh, Steve, I'll love it. I said, okay. That night came, and hundreds of people and family, they all filled the auditorium. And each class had sung all the kids had come up at different times and sung their winter songs. And for the first time ever in the history of this program, not one carol, not one mention of Jesus had been allowed during the night. It was like they were trying to make a statement. Little did they know, I had a statement of my own coming for the grand finale. Sure, it was technically within the bounds that they had set, but it was a statement nonetheless. Suddenly, though, I started to feel as I'm back there, all the kids have gone back to their classrooms, and I'm backstage. I'm suddenly feeling a little bit nervous, right? I love my job. I love these kids. I love this staff. I love these parents. I love that I knew that I would not get another job having that hairstyle, right? Anyway, I did not want to lose my job. But I love Jesus more. And I knew what the season was all about. And when the kids were back in their rooms and the curtains opened, I said, hey, everybody, you know me. I'm Steve Brook. I'm one of your kindergarten teachers. And I have been asked to write and sing a Christmas song for the program tonight. Now, I've also been asked nicely and politely not to write about anything religious. Nervous chuckle through the crowd. So this next song doesn't have the words God or Jesus in it anywhere. Another nervous chuckle. How is he going to do? That's a nice little Christmas ditty. I hope you like it. It goes something like this. Gonna tell you about Christmas, yeah. Aluminum, evergreen trees, tumbling about in the winter breeze. For some odd, peculiar reason, oh, I forgot it's the Christmas season. Santa Claus here, Santa Claus there, Santa Claus even at the shopping square. If Saint Nick were here, he'd probably say, don't you remember why they called me a saint? But I see a star over Bethlehem. Kinda says what Christmas is all about. I want to go, I want to tell every soul, but I forgot, yeah, that's not allowed. The director started looking at me like this. I said, Rule B4389XYZ of the Blue, Red, Yellow American Way Handbook says that if you want to celebrate a certain special holiday, intended to honor a certain special someone, but don't talk about that certain special someone, but rather talk about really groovy stuff, like jingle bells all over the town, sleigh bells making people get down, dashing through the polluted snow to go to the mall to spend all of our dough. Come on, take a big old chug of that train concoction they call eggnog, dip in the candy cane. Cause of course Christmas would never be the same, but I see a star over Bethlehem. Kinda says what Christmas is all about, yeah. I want to go, I want to tell every soul, but I forgot, yeah, that's not allowed. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the smiling faces on the kids this night, oh, it kind of reminds me what Christmas is all about. Oh, but before these smiling faces were ever born on this earth, there was a babe born in Bethlehem under a star. Now you have no clue as to who I'm talking about, because there are many babes born each year in Bethlehem, and many stars in the Bethlehem sky. So you have no clue as to who I'm talking about. We Americans, we're so proud, we know what Christmas is all about. A good thing we believe the full-fledged truth. Santa and Rudolph are on our roof, but I see a star over Bethlehem. Kinda says what Christmas is all about, yeah. I want to go, I want to tell every soul, but I forgot, yeah, that's not all allowed. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I hope I haven't been offensive, defensive, oppressive, or just plain lost all of my five senses. But off in the distance, I think you might see, I think you see exactly what I see, and I see a star over Bethlehem. Kinda says what Christmas is all about, yeah. I want to go, I want to tell every soul, but I forgot, yeah, that's not allowed. Oh, it ain't allowed no more. Don't you know, a land of freedom, freedom, justice, and truth. Don't you know the truth ain't allowed no more? So Merry Christmas with all of my love. Merry Christmas from above. And of course, you don't know who I'm talking about there either. Have yourself a very memorable Christmas. Yeah. Oh man, oh man. Yeah, that's right. Take that, the man. Okay, but you know, as the curtains closed then, I did what any brave, bold proclaimer of truth would do. I slipped back and hid in the bathroom in the kids' classes. I was so afraid of ridicule, of rejection, but mostly I was scared of that director. That director, she had her eyes set on me the whole time. But God seemed to come to me there in that bathroom and said, Steve, you don't have to be afraid. You can come out of there. Besides, it's kind of awkward just talking to you in the bathroom on the John. So, and when I came out, I was blown away with the encouragement of parents and grandparents saying, we loved your song. You're like a young Arlo Guthrie with a great message in it, you know. But I knew that director was out there. So I'm like, I packed that guitar as quick as I could, and I'm trying to find my way out. I remember coming down this hallway. I see the door, and I see around the corner comes this old grandma. She's coming at me like this. Oh, and I'm like, oh no, I'm about ready to get it. You know, I'm getting the scolding. And she grabs my arm real tight and she goes, we're with you, Sonny. We're with you, right? And I'm like, all right, cool. But I'm not about to stick around. I'm out of there. I get out of that place. But I knew that night I was going to have to face the music. The next day I headed into school. I knew that I was likely going to get a scolding, or maybe even lose the job that I loved. But when I came in, the director just said, hi, Steve. Hey, great song last night. I'm like, what universe am I in? I didn't know what was going on. Why the change of tune? Well, a few days later, I'd get the answer when I got a Christmas card in the mail from the only person with more authority than the director. It was from the owner of the school. And it said, thank you, Steve, for your song and for the reminder of the real message of Christmas, the true reason for the season, Jesus Christ. And that school has included a carol or two about Jesus in their winter program every year from then on. I think, yeah. I think because they're scared I might come back, right? See, when God does impossible, we go audible. We cannot help it. And let's be audible this week, okay? Let's all commit to worship Him together as one big family on Christmas Eve. Can't wait. 4 p.m., Christmas Eve, carols and candles and the joy of bringing the kids up and talking to them and the uplifting message of the Christmas story. It was always the highlight of our year. And so let's all be inviting friends and family and neighbors, anyone in our path. And let's let the joy of the Lord be evident every place that we go this week. And so, just invite people. We've got these invitations out there. Take a whole stack of them. We're not going to use them any other time. So get them. Don't leave any here. Get them out into people's hands for this coming Tuesday. Or there's stuff there online. Post things to your friends online as well. Let's be out there. And let's just let the joy of the Lord be evident in every bit of where we go this week. Every restaurant we eat at, every relative we get to visit, whether they're crazy or not, every present that we give, every present that we receive, every Merry Christmas that we float out into our airwaves, let the joy of the Lord just exude from us. On Christmas morning, you guys, you first thing or throughout the day, make sure to take some time to read Luke 2, maybe even dive into Matthew 1 or John 1, 2. But the Christmas story by yourself with your whole family. Thank Him for the greatest gift ever, Jesus Christ. And then in your sugar coma, do not let next Sunday slip your mind. Be back here. We don't take a vacation from church. So same time, same place, because we are going to keep praising the same God for keeping the promise that He made for you and He made for me. Because beyond those angels and those shepherds and that stable and that manger and that night, right, there were a magi 1,000 miles to the east who saw a star in the sky, the Messiah star, another clue that the Messiah, the Christ, the crusher, had come. And they set out to seek Him. If God has the best news ever, we got to seek Him. We got to go out and get it. And if we have received God's best news ever, we have got to be the people who go and tell it. If your God beat all odds to fulfill His promise to you and for you, my friend, you've got to get it, and you've got to go tell it on the mountain, over the hills and everywhere. Go tell it on the mountain that Jesus Christ is born. Amen. Maybe you are here today and you've been hearing this good news about Jesus. You know that you want Him in your life. Well, He loves you, and He died for you to live your life with Him. If you know that it's time for you to trust Christ in your heart, in your mind, in your words, and be baptized in Him, then during this next song, come on up and talk with any of our team that's up here, and we'll walk you through it. Or maybe you've already trusted Him in your life, but maybe today you want to make Legacy your church home whenever you're here in Lakeland. Right? Then come on up, let us know, and we can help you with that too. Or maybe you know that you need prayer for yourself, or for a loved one, or for your family, or even for those you want to reach out to. Come, we would love to pray with you and pray for you. God, you are so awesome. You beat all odds to save us, to crush the curses of sin and separation and death and hell that trapped us. And graciously you gave to us instead righteousness before you, fellowship with you, eternal life in you, and the good gravy of heaven too. All through your Son, Jesus Christ. Every blessing. So if we don't have you, we're going to reach out. We want you. If we have you, we're going to reach out and we're going to share you. And now we are going to worship you and respond to you and adore you. In Jesus' name, amen.